Hey, what is up you guys? Today I thought I would talk about how I hit my Goodreads goal of 60 books within 4 months of 2021. I have read at such a faster rate this year than any previous year. I'm pretty sure in 2019 I only read like 70 books overall, maybe, I can't remember. And then last year I read like 110, maybe, I can't remember either. I probably should have looked this up before I started this video. But already in the first 4 months of 2020 I read 60 books, so I am going to, really surpass my previous years if I really keep this up. So I thought I would just give some like tips about how I've done this and how my reading has changed, because the way that I read now is very different from especially 2019 and then quite different from last year. I feel like I'm just getting like more comfortable in reading, because before 2019 I hadn't really read for years, like I've discussed before in some previous videos. So it's like a learning curve and like getting used to different things, and I just thought I would share what has helped me to read more. And none of these are like groundbreaking tips or anything, like you probably know what they are already. Like I feel like these videos are kind of all the same, but I just want to talk about what has worked for me, and hopefully it will work for you as well, and you can maybe take something away from this video. So if you enjoy this video, please leave a like, please subscribe, let me know your thoughts down below on what I have to say, and then also if you have any tips on how you read more or anything that you think you do differently from me, definitely let me know. And without any further ado, let's just get started. So the first way that my reading has changed, specifically in this year, I think I started doing it around summer last year, but this year I'm like consciously doing it, is reading more than one book at a time. Back in 2019, I would only ever read one book at a time. I wanted to fully immerse myself in the world, the characters, the author's writing style, all of that stuff. And although I do think that is like a really great immersive way of reading, I don't think that now that I am more used to reading more than one book actually takes away from any of those things. If anything, it actually makes me more engaged in each book when I go back to it and have to kind of recall where I was the last time I picked it up in comparison to the other books. And the way that I mostly do this, although not exclusively, is I always have a physical book going, and then I'll sometimes have an ebook going, and then sometimes I'll have an audiobook going. But sometimes it will just be as simple as having 3 physical books. I don't specifically say I need to have one of each. It just I think helps your brain to split it up more if you'd have more than one different format. So for example, if I'm reading a physical book and then I go into the ebook, my mind doesn't really have to think as much about like, okay, which one's this? Which, it's not like a big thing, but it does take your brain a little minute to get used to where you picked up from the last time you were reading, stuff like that. So I think that just having more than one book at a time actually isn't as detrimental to my reading as I used to think it would be. I genuinely, back in 2019, did not want to read more than one book at a time. I was like, no, if I'm reading a book, then I'm reading that book. But now I think it actually helps me read more as well, because when I get tired of reading, your eyes just kind of are fed up at a certain point. If I'm fed up of reading a physical book, I can then pick up an ebook and just jump right into that, and to my eyes it feels different. So it doesn't register as being the same thing. And then obviously audiobooks are completely different. Audiobooks I listen to mostly right now in work, because the job that I have, I am walking around and I don't actually need to do that much thinking. And to be honest, it's just in a supermarket, and it's before any of the customers come in or anything, so I can just put my earphones in and just walk. And then the gym as well, but we'll talk about audiobooks later on in this video because that has its own section. But yeah, definitely just picking up more than one book at a time and having that different format as well definitely helps. But just more than one book at a time. What I also will add though is that I don't really pick up, for example, 2 fantasy books that are quite similar, or 2 non-fiction books. I would never do that. I do try and keep them quite different. So I'll have, well, for example, right now I'm reading Barack Obama's audiobook, his non-fiction about his time being president. I'm also reading the Earthsea books, which are kind of high fantasy series. And I am reading a sci-fi book, which is also by Ursula K. Le Guin, but it's sci-fi, so it's very different tone, and her writing style is actually different as well. So these 3 are all really different. So it really helps my brain split them up. Something that I have really enjoyed doing this year is having themed TBRs. So for example, back in February, I think it was, I read a bunch of books by French authors, and then in March I read a bunch of books by Japanese authors. April I read a bunch of books by Russian authors, and this month I'm reading a bunch of books by my favourite authors that I haven't read before. So having these themed TBRs, I think, keeps things interesting. And what also helps is that I want to make specific videos for these books, but that will be talked about in the next point. But, you know, just having these themed TBRs makes things more interesting, I think, rather than just mood reading, which I definitely used to do. In 2019, I would just completely mood read. I would just pick up whatever I wanted. And although that's not bad, I think that having these themed TBRs and knowing exactly how many pages I'm going to try and read that month and exactly what my goals are and stuff like that actually does help me a lot more than mood reading. I used to really be in favour of mood reading. I think in 2019, I only made a handful of TBRs, and then last year, if I was doing readathons, I would, but I don't think I really did for the rest of the time. But then this year, so far in 2021, I have made a TBR for every single month, and I do genuinely think that it has helped me to read more, because I'm like, okay, I have this whole plan, and if I want to manage to get to this 600-page book later this month, then I need to read this 200-page book like right now. And then also, for example, this month, because I'm reading quite a few by the same authors, like I'm reading quite a few Ursula K. Le Guin's, I'm reading a few James Baldwin's, I'm reading a few Gillian Flynn's. I want to, like, specifically in my head, I'm like, okay, I don't want to read 2 James Baldwin's in a row, so I'm like splitting them up. And just having this plan, it's such a simple thing, but it actually does really help, I believe. And, you know, I never used to be a fan of it because I was like, it's supposed to be fun, like, but genuinely I do think that having these TBRs and setting this plan is still fun. And the next point is kind of the same. I guess I can just talk about it now and like put the two together. But my next point was going to say that making or reading for a purpose has also helped me read more. So for example, with my LGBT classics videos, because I want to make at least one of these videos every single month, I know that I have to read these specific books for these specific videos. And then for the recommendations ones, for like the Japanese authors example, again, it's like, okay, I want to read these books for this specific purpose. And I think knowing that I want to get these videos out then influences me and encourages me to read more. And what I will say is that I was talking to one of my friends about this, and she was like, oh, once it starts, she's not like a reader like we are. She's just like, reads like maybe 1 or 2 books a year. She's like, if it starts to feel like homework or a chore, then it's not fun to me. And this is how I used to view it as well, but because I do really enjoy making these videos and getting everyone's feedback on these videos, you know, like the comments and stuff, it encourages me, and it's not like in a bad way. It doesn't feel like homework, even though I'm like, okay, I need to read these 3 specific books for this specific date. On paper, that sounds like it's homework and it sounds like it's boring, but I find that it encourages me to get to the books and it doesn't really feel like homework. I will say occasionally, some of the books I'm like, I don't really want to get to you right now, but I just push myself to do it, and those are usually the ones that I actually end up enjoying the most. So just like do what feels comfortable to you, I guess. But I have really enjoyed, you know, having these specific themed TBRs for these specific dates and stuff like that. My final point is audiobooks, which I feel like is such a basic point. Every single video that's like how to read faster talks about audiobooks. And I used to say that I didn't like audiobooks. However, I have really recently came to appreciate them. I only listen to about 1 a month. I have listened to 4 so far this year, and I'm listening to the Barack Obama one right now, so that works out at 1 a month. And the reasons I used to say I didn't like audiobooks were 1, because the genre, and 2, because of the place where I was listening to them. So for genre, I used to try and listen to the free audiobooks on YouTube that are classics, and the narrators and stuff on them are like, it is free and they're volunteers, so you know, it is amazing that they're there. They're a really good resource, but a lot of them are kind of shaky, and for some of them the narrator changes with every chapter, which is an interesting way to do things, but it's because it's all volunteers that have put them together. So classics are like kind of hit or miss. I haven't listened to any classics on like Audible that's like more of a higher production. I think that would probably be easier. But the LibriVox, I'm pretty sure it is, recordings on YouTube are kind of hit or miss. And then also I tried to listen to the Dragon Republic, which is book 2 in the Wheel of Time, and the Poppy War series, and that was just like too much on audiobook. There was just too much going on. There was too many characters like with similar names. There was too many settings. Like the setting would change. You would change like what was just, there was just too much going on basically. And that leads into my second point. And I was listening to the Dragon Republic while I was in the gym. And I feel like in the gym, I have a lot more going on in my head. Like I'm thinking of like different reps and counting and stuff like that. So I zone out a lot more, which if I'm listening to, for example, the Barack Obama one right now, that is fine because it's non-fiction. So you don't need to pay attention to like characters and stuff because there isn't any, it's non-fiction. But when it comes to, lots of action and characters and things like that, I feel like it does work for me if I am doing something that's completely mindless. So, for example, if I'm just going on a walk outside, I can listen to an audiobook with like quite a lot of different characters and action and stuff. For example, the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson. I listened to him just like walking around my town, and it was completely fine. Like I could follow everything perfectly. But when it comes to in the gym, I probably wouldn't actually listen to that one. And then another thing I kind of do sometimes is play Animal Crossing, because although there is text on the screen, I don't really read it half the time. And it's just kind of like a mindless game that you don't need to put too much thought into, so you can fully focus on the actions and the characters and stuff in the audiobook. So if you don't think audiobooks are for you, I would say switch up the genre, listen to something that's a little bit more simple, for example, non-fiction or horror. I've listened to both Stephen Graham Jones books that I've read, which is Night of the Mannequins and The Only Good Indians. Only Good Indians. I listened to both of them on audiobook, and they were great because they're quite a small cast of characters. It's quite simple to follow. That horror atmosphere actually works really well in audiobooks as well. Switch up the genre, and then also just switch up like where you're listening to it. Driving is another one. I think driving is a really good place to listen to audiobooks, but I will say that if I'm driving and I'm listening to audiobook, I need to have earphones in. I can't really listen to it out of the car speaker. I don't know what the difference really is, but there is a difference for me. So I would say if you don't think you like audiobooks, switch up a little bit, try like a new genre or a different genre, and just try listening like somewhere else where you are like completely mindless, and maybe it'll work better for you. So hopefully some of these tips were useful for you. I know that they're a little bit simple, but I just thought I would talk about them anyway. And if these helped you at all in any of your reading, well, you wouldn't know yet, would you? I was going to say let me know, but you're probably not going to come back to this video. If you think these are going to be helpful, let me know. To summarise, reading more than one book at once, themed TBRs, reading with a purpose, which if you're not on BookTube, that's probably a bit harder to do if you're just like a casual reader, and audiobooks. That's my 4 tips. So nothing groundbreaking, nothing like new, but just like some little things that I have changed my reading over the last year, which will hopefully help you to hit your Goodreads goal. I cannot believe I've read 60 books already. I think at this point it's like 65 actually, but yeah. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Please let me know your thoughts on all of these tips, or if you have any of your own tips, obviously let me know. I would love to hear them, and I will see you in my next video.